There are places on Earth that maps deliberately avoid, places where nature is not just wild but hostile in ways that feel intentional, and this jungle is one of them. Locals refuse to enter it, governments quietly restrict access, and explorers who ignored the warnings often never returned, or returned changed. This is not a story of myths alone, but of documented disappearances, sealed reports, and truths buried under layers of silence. Before we go any deeper, take a moment to subscribe to the channel because the stories shared here are not recycled internet myths, but carefully crafted narratives revealing the darkest secrets hidden by nature and history. The jungle, known among nearby tribes as the forest that remembers, stretches across an unnamed border zone where compasses fail and satellite signals weaken without explanation, a place where even modern technology seems to lose confidence. And from the first step inside, something feels off, as if the air itself is heavier, thicker, almost watching. Sunlight struggles to reach the ground because the canopy above is unnaturally dense, layered like overlapping walls, and the silence is disturbing, not peaceful but alert, broken only by distant sounds that never seem to come closer, no matter how long you walk toward them. Stories passed down through generations describe this jungle as a living entity, not alive in a poetic sense, but functional, reactive, capable of learning human patterns and responding to them, which is why tribes around it developed strict rules: never travel alone, never follow familiar paths twice, and never stay after nightfall, because the jungle behaves differently when the sun disappears. Historical records show that during early colonial expeditions, entire survey teams vanished inside this forest, leaving behind camps with food still warm, tools neatly placed, and no signs of struggle, which confused authorities because predators do not clean up after themselves, and humans do not simply evaporate. In the mid-20th century, a government-funded research group entered the jungle to study rare plant species rumored to possess unusual biochemical properties, but radio transmissions became distorted within hours, messages repeating out of sequence, voices overlapping as if multiple timelines were bleeding into one channel, and then complete silence. When a recovery team finally entered weeks later, they found the equipment intact but scattered in precise circular patterns, like ritual placement rather than chaos, and several researchers' journals ended mid-sentence, often describing the same phenomenon: the feeling of being followed by something that did not make noise. Animals behave unnaturally near the jungle's edge, refusing to cross invisible boundaries, while birds abruptly change direction mid-flight, as if encountering an unseen barrier, and predators that normally dominate the region simply disappear from this zone, creating an unnatural ecological vacuum that scientists still cannot explain. One of the most disturbing aspects of the forbidden jungle is its effect on human perception of time, as survivors who managed to exit describe spending only a few hours inside, while outside records show days or even weeks had passed, suggesting extreme temporal distortion possibly caused by magnetic anomalies beneath the forest floor. Geological surveys hint at massive mineral deposits under the jungle, including rare earth elements capable of interfering with neural activity, which might explain the hallucinations, memory gaps, and sudden panic reported by those who entered. But this does not explain the consistency of certain experiences described by people who never met each other. Many survivors independently mention hearing familiar voices calling their names from deep within the forest, voices of loved ones long dead or far away, always leading them off established paths, and those who followed rarely returned, while those who resisted described intense headaches, nosebleeds, and overwhelming dread. At night, the jungle changes completely, with shadows moving independently of their sources, trees appearing closer together than before, and paths looping back on themselves even when marked, creating a psychological maze that breaks down orientation and decision-making, a phenomenon documented in multiple military reports now partially declassified. One leaked document suggests that during a classified operation, motion sensors placed throughout the jungle detected coordinated movement patterns far larger than any known animal, yet thermal imaging showed nothing, implying either a non-heat-emitting presence or something capable of masking itself completely. The jungle has also become a dumping ground for unanswered questions because whenever incidents occur nearby, missing villagers, unexplained deaths, aircraft anomalies, the investigation quietly ends once the trail points toward the forest, as if there is an unspoken agreement that some boundaries should not be crossed. Scientists debate whether the jungle's danger is purely environmental, a perfect storm of toxic spores, electromagnetic fields, and psychological stressors, or whether something else is at work, something we lack the language to describe because traditional science struggles to categorize threats that behave intelligently without fitting known biological frameworks. What makes this jungle truly forbidden is not just the risk of physical harm, but the way it dismantles human certainty, eroding logic, memory, and identity, leaving behind people who no longer trust their senses, their thoughts, or even their own reflections, which is why governments prefer to label it restricted rather than explain what they cannot control. As we reach the end of this first part, remember this: the jungle does not chase intruders, it waits. We will uncover what might actually be hiding inside this forest, why authorities refuse to study it further, and the terrifying possibility that the jungle is not hostile, but selective. What truly makes this jungle forbidden is not what people see inside it, but what they fail to understand even after leaving. Because the forest does not rely on fear alone, it relies on confusion, and confusion is far more dangerous than terror. Over the years, investigators noticed something deeply unsettling. People who entered the jungle with arrogance or excitement disappeared far more often than those who entered with hesitation, as if the forest reacted not to movement but to mindset. Survivors repeatedly described the same impossible sensation, the feeling that the jungle was rearranging itself in response to their thoughts, paths subtly shifting after moments of confidence, sounds growing louder when fear spiked, and silence becoming absolute when someone tried to remain calm. One explorer wrote that the jungle did not feel empty but occupied, not by animals or tribes, but by something layered into the environment itself, something without a face or form, yet undeniably present, as if the forest had learned how humans think and was testing its influence. This theory gained weight when psychologists examined survivors and found that many experienced identical dream patterns weeks after leaving. Dreams of standing still while the jungle moved around them, trees bending inward, roots tightening like veins, and a sensation of being remembered rather than hunted. Even more disturbing was the discovery that some survivors showed altered decision-making patterns long after exposure, becoming overly cautious, detached, and hyper-aware of surroundings, as if their brains had been rewired to remain on alert for something that no longer existed. Ancient oral traditions from tribes living near the jungle describe it not as cursed land, but as the Watcher Ground, a place where nature learned to observe humans after witnessing centuries of violence, exploitation, and expansion, deciding which ones were allowed to pass and which were not. According to these stories, the jungle was never meant to be entered casually because it was designed, naturally or otherwise, to act as a boundary, separating those who respect limits from those who believe everything exists to be conquered. This may explain why attempts to clear sections of the forest have always failed, with machinery breaking down without mechanical cause, workers experiencing sudden illness, and cleared land regrowing at abnormal speeds, as if the jungle corrected damage faster than nature should allow.
Satellite studies quietly revealed that the jungle emits irregular electromagnetic pulses, not strong enough to destroy equipment outright, but sufficient to disrupt navigation, memory formation, and sensory processing, which could explain why people feel lost even when standing still. But electromagnetic interference alone does not explain why different individuals, separated by decades and cultures, describe hearing the same phrases whispered in moments of exhaustion, phrases urging them to rest, to stop fighting, to stay where it's quiet. Some linguists believe these whispers are not words at all, but the brain attempting to interpret environmental signals it cannot categorize, translating pressure, vibration, and frequency into familiar language as a survival mechanism. During a classified expedition, researchers attempted to record ambient sound frequencies deep within the jungle and later discovered patterns resembling structured communication rather than random noise, repeating sequences that aligned with no known animal behavior. The expedition was terminated after team members began experiencing shared emotional states without speaking, sudden dread, calm, or panic spreading instantly through the group, suggesting an external influence capable of synchronizing human responses. An internal report concluded that prolonged exposure to the jungle increased the risk of identity dissolution, where individuals struggled to distinguish their own thoughts from environmental influence, a condition considered more dangerous than physical injury. This finding alone was enough to halt further human research because a place that could alter cognition posed risks beyond containment, raising ethical questions no government wanted to publicly answer. What frightens authorities most is the possibility that the jungle is not hostile by default, but selective, allowing some individuals to leave because they pose no threat, while retaining others who attempt control, dominance, or extraction. If true, then the jungle functions less like a trap and more like a filter, silently enforcing rules humanity never agreed to but continues to violate elsewhere. The absence of bodies, the intact equipment, and the lack of struggle all suggest that disappearance is not violent, but procedural, as if people are simply removed from the equation once deemed incompatible. This theory reshakes the question entirely, because instead of asking why the jungle kills, we are forced to ask why it lets anyone go at all. Perhaps those who return are not spared by luck, but released deliberately, carrying fragmented memories as warnings rather than evidence, ensuring the jungle's secret remains protected by disbelief. And that may be the most effective defense of all. Not walls, not weapons, but doubt. Because as long as stories sound unbelievable, no serious effort will ever be made to challenge the truth. So the jungle remains forbidden, not because it is unexplored, but because it has already explored us, measured our intentions, and decided that some knowledge is too destabilizing for a species still convinced it stands at the top of nature's hierarchy. In the end, the scariest fact is not that something unknown exists inside this jungle, but that it may be watching patiently, knowing that humans will eventually return, not out of necessity, but out of the same curiosity that has always led them into places they were never meant to control.